Earlier today, Fallout 76 got yet another new update, this ranging from about 1 gigabyte to almost 10 gigabytes in size depending on which platform you're playing on, and here I'm going to break down what exactly was changed or added. What is likely to be more interesting for at least some of you? Later on in this video, I want to highlight some of the recent details that were shared around the upcoming Expeditions DLC for Fallout 76. These were shared a bit subtly just by a dev on Discord, including one revelation that they are actually planning to go outside of the existing Fallout universe, aka there are plans to actually take Fallout to a completely new city, which does feel like a pretty large new announcement from this all. Either way, some of the biggest changes coming from this update are actually around exploit fixes, some of which did create some very interesting encounters in game. One such one was exploit fix an issue which cheaters could place NPCs in the game world. A lot of times with these patch notes, things are very vague, very ominous, but when you actually dive into what was happening here, it's kind of hilarious. There's been an exploit for a bit now where you could actually inject NPCs into inventories and in turn cause a bunch of enemy NPCs to just spawn randomly in the world in Fallout 76. Despite this being around for a decent amount of time, I couldn't find too many clips of it in action, but we do have a clip from a live stream where you could see somebody at his own camp actually just spawning in NPCs, basically creating a little arena in the middle of his camp, which admittedly is pretty awesome, but you could obviously see how this could be wildly exploited. There's tons of posts about this online, people stumbling upon game bosses like the Scorched Beast Queen or even Earl at things like train stations, because people are just randomly spawning these creatures all over. Although that was actually only one half of this exploit, as you'd also be able to do all kinds of things like put certain things in display cases and have miscellaneous NPCs in your camp. DTD actually has a really good video he just posted yesterday looking at some of this as he stumbled upon it. I'll have a link to that down below. So now this is thankfully fixed, but at the same time, if you've been playing for the past couple of weeks to a month, you've probably had at least a couple of interesting encounters if you're active enough, stumbling upon some very strange creatures in unexpected places. But they didn't stop with that exploit. Another one we did see is address an exploit that could cause a weapon to deal more damage than intended under certain circumstances. That patch note being incredibly vague, but this is actually a very specific bug or exploit that was occurring, where basically you could get a million or billion damage Tesla rifle in Fallout 76. So more or less what would happen here is the Tesla rifle is intended to spawn at above level 40. So if you did manage to get one to spawn at level 1, let's say, or under level 40, a low level in particular, this was not technically supposed to be possible in the game, so it would have a damage value of 0 to counteract that, which really isn't a big deal. This is the system that is in place for all weapons that spawn at too low of a level. They're only supposed to spawn above a certain level. If they're below that certain level, their damage will be defaulted to 0. The special attribute that did come with the Tesla rifle, though, at least up until this update, is certain mods would actually give you a subtractive damage reduction. This, of course, is always the thing in Fallout games. Certain mods do apply damage bonuses. A lot of times, if you're going from semi-automatic to fully automatic, your weapon will deal less damage. For most weapons, this will be a percentage decrease, but with the Tesla rifle, it wasn't. It was going to be a flat value of decreasing your damage by about 15. So if you did this to a level 1 Tesla rifle that had a damage value of 0, it would actually have a negative damage value because it wasn't multiplicative, it was subtractive, meaning that you would basically have infinite damage because the game would bug out at it having a negative damage value. And this was actually fairly widespread. It was one of the few high god tier weapons that was available and possible on all 3 platforms. But again, this now has subsequently been fixed, so those million or even billion damage Tesla rifles are no more in Fallout 76. And if anything, I imagine one of the reasons this patch note is so vague is this hypothetically is possible with other weapons. That whole fundamental system of having 0 damage and then actually taking it to a negative integer could still happen, hypothetically, if somebody figures that out. They also addressed an exploit in which players could obtain certain magazines repeatedly from the same location. This is actually a really old one. There's basically a way to dupe magazines using photo mode in a very specific location with a specific magazine. Once you did this, you could just pick up the magazine over and over again and get basically an infinite number of magazines. A lot of these consumable items, magazines, bobbleheads, etc. have been duped to basically infinity over the years of the various dupes and exploits around them, so although this is nice, it's 1, long overdue, and 2, the economy for this kind of stuff is just so far gone at this point. A pretty important fix is around the complete different daily quest world challenge, where the challenges required to complete this have been reduced from 23 to 22, so now it can correctly be completed and you can correctly earn your 80 atoms. It's kind of a funny one. Bethesda actually removed the quest to pass the buck almost a year ago in May 2021. This making it so there were 22 daily quests to complete Fallout 76, but then this world challenge was added requiring 23 daily quests to complete. So they actually couldn't complete it, and now it does work, at least for some people. There's still some people having issues completing this one. It still says there is a missing quest, although it does read 22 out of 22 for some reason, so perhaps further bug fixing is needed. They finally fixed one of the big issues around Thorn armor, where its bleed effect would stack unintentionally. To help account for this change, the bleed effect now deals 5 times its previous damage. Thorn armor was nerfed into the ground a while ago, and there was this unintended feature kind of left in. The stacking aspect wasn't supposed to be there. It made it somewhat relevant. Now the removal of this makes this armor pretty irrelevant. The vast majority of people that were still using it are probably going to walk away from it. They fixed some issues around VATS, how you can get a black screen when using VATS in third person with a melee weapon. You can now use automatic melee weapons in VATS like the Ripper or the Chainsaw. This will actually progress the crit meter now, which was previously broken, making them fairly unusable on a lot of builds. Missile launchers now actually take condition damage when used. They used to be unbreakable, which is kind of hilarious. Another pretty hilarious one was if you were playing Fallout 76 in a non-English setting, there was a bug where water sources wouldn't move. There's basically some kind of issue where it would translate the water. So the water would look like this, and wrong. It wouldn't have the nice flowy nature that on the English variant it would, but thankfully this too has been fixed, as well as there are a variety of other bug fixes around camps and even with public events. So naturally, this was very far from a content-heavy update, unless you consider this stuffed turkey added to the Atomic Shop content. This isn't inherently a bad thing, as several pretty crucial exploits were addressed and fixed here, but unfortunately, there's also a fair amount of stuff that just wasn't fixed. Some dupes and armor-related exploits do still exist. The persistent problem with legacy weapons being ridiculously overpowered is still here, and Bethesda seems reluctant to address it. Actually, on the most recent public test server update, they buffed legacy weapons even further. That being due to the explosive radius fix on the PTS. And now we're really just left here waiting for the June update, which will have a bunch of new events, but there's really not a whole ton of reasons to be actively playing this game. Hopefully this video is informative to you, but I wouldn't be shocked if in the next month or so we see the player count dip even further. But that's actually potentially okay, because what we have on the horizon sounds very promising. We just got quite a few updates around expeditions from one of the devs on the official Bethesda Game Studios Discord. They describe how the majority of Bethesda Game Studios Austin overall is actually working on expeditions, which is actually pretty exciting. This could explain why the content leading up to this, why over the past year, there have been such a content drought. Perhaps there is just literally a ton of people working on this one big thing. And they even detail how the amount of time they're spending with environment art of each area for the pit expedition is unprecedented for this game. I think people will not be expecting the visual level of fidelity that we're shooting for here. Expedition's finally dropping, and a follow-up by Nuka World on Tor, which is actually being worked on by a separate studio, at least if data mines are to be believed, that being the newly added Double 11, could be pretty huge. We could get Expeditions as a massive update, and a couple of months later, Nuka World on Tor as a secondary massive update because, again, 2 separate teams. But even further, we hear how this isn't actually going to be an exact copy of the pit from Fallout 3. The parts of the city that Fallout 3 the pit represent will not be the same parts of the city that the 76 pit represent. I imagine some locations will be exactly the same as far as the actual location, but they'll be updated. This is taking place way before the events of the pit, Fallout 76 being over 150 years earlier, and this gives them opportunities to expand or add in their own things. They describe how this experience won't be time-gated, no hard kick-out time countdown, which is going to be very nice. And then I think one of the biggest reveals of all is around future expeditions. One, I guess the fact that there even is going to be future expeditions. I'm not sure that was officially really confirmed anywhere. But then also how there are seemingly plans for one of the future expeditions to be in a totally new city. A city never featured in a Fallout game previously, which opens up a ton of possibilities. Like I mentioned before, Fallout 76 is very early on in the Fallout lore timeline. There's a lot of interesting ways you can tackle this or look at places very soon after the bombs dropped, after the apocalypse kicked in. I'm very excited to see what they do with this, where they explore, and there's of course a whole wealth of potential. I feel like every major city and basically just every state in the US is a potential setting with interesting spots to explore. And even when we're just looking at the pit, they actually do mention there are several fan favorite elements of the pit that I think we're excited to bring back and expand the lore of. And just overall, for better or worse, this really opens up a big opportunity for Bethesda Game Studios, Austin, and BGS overall to grow that lore in certain areas, whether that be geographically or even revisiting certain things they tackled in other games. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see what they're working on. I hope we hear something at this E3, and I imagine we will. I assume another trailer this summer with the E3 replacement is definitely coming. With that said, though, that's the update on Fallout 76, the update as far as the game itself, but then also what they have coming in the future. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.